Hello, and welcome to Founder Freedom, From Hustler to CEO, the podcast built for e-commerce entrepreneurs who are ready to work less, earn more, and scale smarter. Here we explore the stories of visionary entrepreneurs, inventors, and change makers who are reshaping industries with innovation and passion. Today we're joined by a remarkable business leader who's revolutionizing backyard maple syrup making, Kate Whelley McCabe, co-founder of Vermont Evaporator Company. Kate and her team design, manufacture, and sell tools and equipment that make backyard sugaring accessible, fun, and efficient. What started as a family hobby in the heart of Vermont has grown into a thriving business, serving maple syrup enthusiasts across the United States and Canadian provinces. In this episode, Kate shares the origin story of the Vermont Evaporator Company, how a simple backyard challenge led to an innovative product, and the growing community of DIY maple syrup makers across North America. We'll also dive into the business of small-scale manufacturing, the power of family entrepreneurship, and the trends shaping the future of this sweet industry. Plus, Kate gives us an insider's look at the sugaring season, balancing business and tradition, and how Vermont's rich maple culture is inspiring backyard hobbyists everywhere. Get ready for a fascinating conversation about innovation, tradition, and the magic of making maple syrup at home. Let's get into it. Hi, Kate.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. So, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, about what inspired you to develop and then move on with the evolution of your company?
Sure. So my husband and I moved to a plot of land, 10 acres in Montpelier, Vermont, the United States' smallest state capital. And we recognized pretty shortly after moving in that we had a lovely group of sugar maple trees sort of across the river and up the hill from our home. And so we decided we wanted to try to make maple syrup. And not knowing what we were doing, we did it very in a very messy and inefficient way. We used our grill and the Thanksgiving turkey pan and tapped a couple trees and made a very expensive 3/4 of a gallon of maple syrup over the course of a weekend. And my husband thought, gosh, we should really kind of invest in this hobby next year. And we looked around and didn't find anything on the market that was in our price range, and in our price range meaning under $1,000 to sort of get started. And so we came up with the sapling evaporator, which is a barrel style outdoor evaporator that actually converts into a grill, a smoker, and a pizza oven in the off season. Those ideas came in a little later, but the barrel evaporator with a real stainless steel efficient food grade pan was our major innovation. We at first were able to price it well under $1,000. It's about $1,500 retail now, but this is 10 years ago, and everything has pretty much doubled in price in the last 10 years. So we feel like we're keeping up. But the sapling evaporator is how we started making maple syrup. We started, in earnest. We started with 25 taps, and we've now grown our own hobby to 300 taps. And during that 10 years of us growing our hobby, we also grew a business out of that one product. And so what started with the sapling evaporator is now about an 85 SKU line of products that includes 4 different sizes of evaporators, a line of pans, and everything from tree to table. So drill bits and fancy glasses, fancy jars for putting your maple syrup in. Yeah.
Love it. Tree to table. And who doesn't like to use their kitchen tools for pizza? I mean, geez.
There's nothing like wood-fired pizza. All of our equipment is wood-fired, and so the pizza oven that you get when you invest in the sapling is a wood-fired pizza oven, and it's not a Tuesday night dinner, right? It's a Saturday night dinner, but nothing like wood-fired pizza.
Very cool. Very cool. So that's a great story. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
So you kind of described the gap in the market as being, non-affordable equipment for the DIYer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Explain, what was the existing way of doing things that were broken?
Yep. So there are 2 things, actually. One thing is that there weren't any small evaporators that were priced under $1,000. At that time, 10 years ago, you were still looking at about $1,500 for equipment that now is probably priced at about $3,000. And not only was that above our budget, but those items are specially made for a sugar house. So they're meant to be a permanent fixture in a covered place. And that, unless you have an easily convertible outbuilding already on your property, which we did not, that's an extra expense, right? So when we eventually built our sugar house, which we did using our own plans and, trees from our land, we did it on the cheap. right? We still put in, a couple of $1,000s to build that sugar house. So
Sure.
time, energy, money.
Right.
We recognized pretty soon after we started the company that that gap in the market existed, not with respect only to the evaporator, but with respect to all sorts of things that you use when you make maple syrup. So, for example, filters. You filter maple syrup, especially if you're going to give it away in a fancy glass. And the ones on the market at the time when we entered the market were 8 quart, just huge, like way too big to use in your kitchen. We were able to source some 1 quart filter sets, right? So they're like more appropriately sized for the sorts of things that you have in your kitchen, so that after you're done, doing most of the messy stuff outside, you bring your maple syrup in, you finish it in your kitchen. You use an appropriately sized thermometer, which we sourced, and then use some appropriately sized filters to get it pretty.
Very cool. You really broke it down for the home food maker.
Yeah. And, the other thing we do is, so in addition to making evaporators, we distribute some smaller evaporators for other companies. And we never have sold anything without using it ourselves. And so we will use, for example, the Dominion and Grimm Mini Sportman evaporator was the first evaporator we started distributing that was made by another company. We used it for a season, revised their user manual so that it was understandable to a true beginner. Those manuals are sometimes written assuming a level of knowledge,
right,
as if you had grown up in the industry.
Right.
And so we change things like that so that more people have access to the kinds of tools and equipment that they need at their level of
and
understanding.
the knowledge. Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome. So, I mean, you've talked about like how the things were broken. You kind of touched on a little bit about how your company solves the problem for the home maple syrup maker. What do you feel is like the biggest misconception maybe that people have about what your company does?
Well, we get a lot of requests to sell syrup, so we don't yet sell syrup as a company. That's a totally different business altogether. Certainly is a possibility, but that's the one that we have to correct most often about us. I guess the misconception about the misconception that we spend the most energy, I'd say, sort of trying to clarify, is that making maple syrup, while it is a lot of work, is not difficult, and truly anybody can do it. And so that's part of how we approach people about the hobby, and we try to facilitate that because we know it to be true.
So you get a lot of inquiries before people actually make a purchase decision.
Yeah, a lot of inquiries, a lot of requests for, walking through sort of a suite of items that somebody might need to buy. And, we're a small company. We answer the phone. We answer our email. And we're always happy to talk to people about how to get started.
That's cool. Listen to that, folks. They actually have to sell their product. Amazing. Do you have maybe a little success story of like a customer review that tickles you?
Yeah. Well, right now, I guess it's front of mind because for the 3rd year, we have been collaborating with a local middle school. And this middle school has a really special program called a sustainability program. And they study all sorts of things having to do with how to, they garden, they learn how to mend clothes, they learn how to fix things that are broken instead of buying new. And they are learning how to make maple syrup, and not only make maple syrup, but how to make it, how to sell it. And then, the kids get a chance to sort of run a business. So how to run a business. And they give away, a third of their profits, and they donate a third of their profits to the parents group that, runs dances and things. And then they reinvest a third of their profits into their program. And so they were able to do that not only because I answered the phone and was, have been helping them all along determine sort of what taps and buckets they need and how to do, the art and science of sugaring, but also because they're able to use our sapling evaporator on campus. So Fridays during this time of the year, they will actually sugar during the school day and into the after school activity sort of hours on campus, because they have this portable sap evaporator that they can use outside, right? So the school didn't have the time, energy, or resources to build a sugar house. That's pretty complicated stuff when you're talking about public land, right? But they were able to invest, at that time, $1,000, $1,100 in a sapling evaporator so that they could actually show members of the school community how they were making maple syrup in the sustainability class. So that's pretty cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
Keeping those kids busy after
Keeping
school
them out
hours
of
is
trouble.
important.
They love it. They love it.
That's
You know.
great.
Yep.
So, do you see any trends that are shaping the future of your little industry?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to describe or, define our industry as the industry for maple sugaring equipment as a whole, what's happening in the whole industry is that because the professional sugar makers are sort of consolidating,
Okay.
the kind of equipment that is being offered at the professional level is getting bigger and
Mm,
shinier and more
mm,
expensive, right?
right.
And so that sort of opens up an interesting trend on the bottom. It's kind of going both ways. Like, so that's happening. And then also the hobby itself of making maple syrup is growing, and more companies are popping up to provide different kinds of equipment and services for the hobby sugar maker. I'm thinking in particular of some friends of mine, some colleagues of mine in upstate New York. The Bucket RO is another company that they
Mm,
do almost exclusively reverse osmosis, very, very small scale reverse osmosis for
mm-hmm.
sugar makers. And so Vermont Evaporator and the Bucket RO are sort of constantly sending each other customers because we're sort of
Mm,
filling in, the gaps
yeah.
for what we each don't provide
Yeah.
for the community. But there's a lot of those kinds of companies that are popping up, and the fact that they keep popping up says to me that what I know to be true from just personal experience running this company as well, that the hobby itself is growing.
Right.
So it's
For
funny,
sure.
it's at the top end and at the bottom end, right, at the very biggest and at the very
Mm-hmm.
smallest,
That's great vision.
the
That's
company is
great
growing.
vision.
Yeah.
I mean, I like your little saying about tree to table. That's really cute and
Yeah,
totally timely. I
it
mean,
works. Yeah.
for the listeners, I live in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin, to me, because I've been all over the country, is probably one of the least known, biggest farm to table states in their
Yeah.
country, after
Yeah.
after California, obviously. But it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So, from a business perspective of maybe other e-commerce companies or your partners and stuff, I mean, what advice would you have looking ahead into the future to try to stay ahead of the curve of being a product manufacturer and seller?
Yeah, interesting. Well, for e-commerce sellers in the maple space
Mm-hmm.
in particular, I think there's a real opportunity to grow the audience by being inclusive of people we might not normally think of as sugar makers. So when you get at a very small scale, you don't need to live in the boonies
Mm-hmm.
to make maple syrup. You can live on a cul-de-sac, pool resources with neighbors, and have
Mm.
a neighborhood boil. I have customers that do that
Mm-hmm.
here in Montpelier, Vermont, led by a 14-year-old kid who
Nice.
had a bee in a bonnet, right? And you
Yeah.
can also, there's urban sugar making happening both in Burlington, with a group of young college students, and I've got customers in Philadelphia and even New York City. So remembering that in how you market and how you message to include people who are not necessarily rural in your advertising, I think
Right.
is a real opportunity.
Great advice. Don't exclude anybody from your
No,
marketing.
and that goes for geography too. We travel on the off season to like homesteader fairs. That's sort of our niche. And we, for the first time, went to the Homesteaders of America annual conference, which is held in rural Virginia. And folks there are just as enthusiastic as folks here about
Mm-hmm.
doing for themselves, making their own and sort of sustainable and subsistence living. They might not be quite as educated about maple, but they're just as enthusiastic. And so not leaving out, there are sugar makers in Virginia and West Virginia and North Carolina
Mm-hmm.
and Georgia,
Mm.
because you can make maple syrup from any maple. And there are
Mm-hmm.
dozens of kinds of maple, including the red maple, which lives everywhere.
Right.
So all you need is a maple of any kind and any kind of freeze thaw cycle ever in your calendar
Mm-hmm.
year to
Mm.
make maple. And
That's what.
so, we have customers in 40 US states and
Right.
6 or 7 Canadian provinces. So it's bigger than New England, right? It's bigger than Vermont and the Midwest. It's
Right.
it's all over.
That's awesome. So you've
Yeah.
been very intentional about finding your customer avatars where they live.
Yes. Yep,
Love it.
for sure.
So looking ahead, what's next for your company? in the next 3 to 5?
Yes. So when we started this company almost 10 years ago now, we said, how long do we want to run this company? It was a time when I'd actually, my husband and I are both attorneys, and I was stepping back from attorney work to run this company, which worked really well for us having little kids. Well, 10 years later, those little kids are now real big kids.
Yeah.
As in like adults or almost adults. And so that opens up new opportunities for us, right? So we said to ourselves, okay, how long are we going to do this? We're going to do this for about 10 years. So right now we're in the process of putting together a plan to find the next owners of the Vermont Evaporator Company.
Nice.
And the kinds of folks that we're looking for are both, big equipment manufacturers that might want to grow their hobby line, right? Might want to take advantage of some of that growth, even as they're making big things for big people. Other e-commerce brands that are doing backyard activities or sort of outdoor living.
Yep.
And last but not least, like high net worth individuals, maybe young, middle-aged, looking to uproot and move to Vermont, move somewhere rural and start something that, it's e-commerce, but it still feels very tangible to do this business.
Nice.
Somebody with a little bit of cash and a little bit of know-how could really come here and take this business under their wing and sort of scale it to the next level.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well thought out.
Thank you.
Well thought out. That's what happens with education, people. I did not
Top
finish
of
my
mind.
schooling. So how can listeners, specifically customers, get more involved with what you're building?
So right now, because we're at the end of the selling season, we're in the middle of sugaring season, which means we're at the end of our sales season. So right now, just about everything online is on sale. So if you're looking to get into this hobby and you want to get a start, visit vermontevaporator.com and see what we have to offer, and then call us or email us if you want to chat.
Awesome.
We're also just about to drop a social media giveaway. So on Instagram and Facebook, we're at Vermont Evaporator Company, all spelled out. So, follow us, like us now. We're going to give away some free stuff with some other sort of household Vermont brands, which is kind of fun. We all know each other up here. So if you like free stuff, follow us on Instagram and you'll see some cool free stuff coming your way.
There you go, listeners. Free stuff.
Free stuff.
Social media. You're there every day. That's awesome. Well, thanks for all of your input here today, Kate. It was lovely to learn about your business and you a little bit deeper. Appreciate that.
Well, thanks for the invite. Yeah, it was nice to be asked.
So that's a wrap, folks, on today's episode with Kate Whelley McCabe of Vermont Evaporator Company. From backyard sugaring to scaling a mission-driven brand, Kate's story is a sweet reminder that innovation can start right at home. If you love this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow entrepreneur. To learn more about Kate's work or get started with your own maple syrup adventure, visit vermontevaporator.com. Thanks for listening to Founder Freedom. Until next time, keep building smart, scaling slow, and savoring the journey.